Well, hello everybody. Today we are talking about energetic clearage for obstacle removal, one of my favorite topics. I'm going to give you some tools and tricks today that you can do on your own. Anybody can do this. You don't need a background, you don't need your own practice. This is some very simple energy transmutation work. I have a little bit of a list today. Apologies. I hope you can understand me. But let me pull up the PowerPoint and we'll jump right into it because I'm very excited. All right. Share. Thank you. There we go. All right, let's make me a little bit bigger. There we go. All right, so this month's special EDU for all of you lovely Patreons that are in my $5 a month tier or higher tier. This was our special education pick. And the reason I chose this is because Uranus is going into Gemini. I think it's an out with the old, in with the new energy for everybody across the board right now in terms of planetary influence. And honestly, I think it's good to challenge the way that we look at obstacles every once in a while. Obstacles exist for a reason, right? And there's always a purpose. And I think sometimes we're in the midst of obstacle clearage. It can be hard to see that purpose. So I thought we would talk a little bit about that today. So, energetic clearing for obstacle removal, it's kind of a form of energy alchemy for clearing your path, especially if you're a manifester like myself. Well, we're all manifestors, whether we acknowledge that or not. Okay. First and foremost, a lot of the techniques I'm going to talk about today do have their roots in Mexican magic, brujeria. It goes by a lot of different names, but I find that these techniques work best in my practice. I have a very omnistic practice. It's a polytheistic practice, so I do incorporate lots of different methodologies. I do tweak them a little bit, but a lot of the energy cleansing work that I find is most beneficial does have those Mexican Spanish roots. So I always want to acknowledge that right off the bat. So today, again, we're going to challenge how we view obstacles. Uh-oh, am I frozen? I just froze for a minute. So we're going to challenge how we view obstacles, how to identify and discern what these obstacles are, why they exist, how to release them, and then we're going to talk about correspondences, helpers, allies that we can use and pull in for energetic clearage. I'm trying to get better with PowerPoint, you guys. All right, so let's talk about energy transmutation. Um, I I really, this is one of my favorite areas in my practice. I like to use the periodic table of elements. I kind of have a scientific chemistry, physicist, quantum theory angle on energy transmutation, but you don't need that. Energetic challenges exist for a reason, right? And all we really need to clear an obstacle, which is basically what is an obstacle? It's something standing in the path of us manifesting something, right? But obstacles in and of themselves are a manifestation. They are a manifestation of energy. You have to remember that a lot of times these obstacles are a side effect of another manifestation request that we're working on. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about energetic entities, how to detect them, and really the perception of these things, the nature of these things. There is a very strong spiritual significance to obstacles. These are usually very powerful encounters in our lives when we're clearing an obstacle. And I do believe that most obstacles that we face in this life, they're kind of very intricately designed, engineered, and weaved to guide us, right? I want to share a quick story with you. Her name is Wendy Mata. She's an energy worker. I've gone to her workshops in Baltimore, Detroit. I really like her. And this story is actually her story. I like sharing it because it was very impactful. But Wendy was on a plane. She was flying to Mexico to visit her family. And she was stuck on this plane on the tarmac. I don't know what was going on. I think there was a storm or something. And she was stuck on this plane for a long time, a couple of hours. They couldn't move. So obviously, huge obstacle, right? She needed to get to Mexico. There were things lined up. She was going to be late for things. It was just everything was falling apart. And she had a lot of big plans. She had been manifesting this trip for a while. So she's sitting on this plane. She's infuriated. She's irritated. She's, angry. She's trying to figure out what to do to pass the time. She opens up her phone, goes on her Tinder app, some new profiles on there. She decides to reach out to this guy because, well, she's doing nothing more than sitting on this plane anyway. And they start talking, right? He responds immediately. They start chatting back and forth. They talk for a couple of hours until that plane finally is able to take off. Long story short, she's been married to this guy now for over 10 years, right? And if that situation, if that obstacle had not presented itself, she probably would have never met this guy, right? So it's just kind of a quick little kind of glance at how obstacles sometimes exist for a divine purpose, right? So I like that story. So I always share that when I'm talking about obstacles and how they can have meaning outside of just pissing us off, right? So there usually is a spiritual reason for an obstacle. I want you guys to think in terms of obstacles being teachers, teaching us lessons, teaching us resilience, patience, how to tap into our own personal power and our will. I think that obstacles exist to prompt us to question our own direction. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? I think that obstacles are also reminders sometimes of lessons that have already been presented to us that we haven't fully digested, right? So if we have these unlearned lessons, these obstacles will keep reoccurring because there is a need for transformation. And so I have a lot of clients that are like, why does this keep happening? Why does this keep happening? And I'm like, well, there is a need for transformation. There is some sort of lesson here, something that you are supposed to be growing into. And this obstacle, as irritating as it might be, is going to continue to present itself until this is digested, right? So it's usually energy that needs dissolution. That could be just stagnant energy. We're holding on to shit from the past. It could be a negative energy, just, kind of like a negative outlook. I have a lot of negative Nancy's I work with, I mean, no matter how blue the sky is, they always find the one dark cloud in it, and when we have that kind of perception and processing conditioning, it'll be very difficult to manifest things without having to work through a shitload of obstacles. So it's usually something very stagnant, something that doesn't serve a very good purpose. Sometimes obstacles, I think, come in because there is this divine intervention piece where the divine, the universe, the entities in it are rerouting our path, taking us towards our destiny, our fate, our north node, what have you. Maybe it's protective in nature. So it's important that we identify obstacles when they occur so we can figure out what is going on so that I can best address it to clear this obstacle and manifest my goal. All right, so energetic manipulation. Here's some practical applications of that. I'm going to give you a couple of applications to use today and these all are very simple, but they do require practice. They require visualization. They require imagery. Some people that's very easy. Others it's very, very difficult. So it does take a little practice. I do recommend for those of you that are able, mind machines are great. I use a Casina. Lisa has a David Pals unit. They can really help you with this visualization process to kind of get into a groove. But one of the practical applications right off the bat here for manipulating energy is first, you want to create a timeline. This is associated to your goal. So say, for example, I'm going to open up a brick and mortar shop in November. So I have this timeline now. It's April, May, June, July, August, September, October. November is when I'm opening up the shop, right? So I want to scan this timeline for obstacles. Again, this is done. I'm doing this a very kind of rough explanation way. We're going to scan that timeline for obstacles. We are going to start releasing those obstacles to Earth in a counterclockwise manner. And again, I'm brief overview. I'll get into this more later. I just kind of want to break down the meat and potatoes of one of the applications for removing obstacles. Now, once you start releasing these obstacles that you're finding on this timeline in a counterclockwise fashion, we're going to heal the timeline. We're going to heal it by channeling sacred green light or fire through our body. Then we're going to seal the timeline by channeling blue light or blue fire, right? We're going to vocalize our new reality. We're going to express gratitude, and we are going to do a scan. So I've talked about this in previous EDUs. So some of this stuff I'm not going to jump into too deeply because I have videos already on my YouTube or on Patreon about this. But you can use your hands or your palms as scanners. It's a good way, and this again takes a little practice to scan an energy field or a person looking for resistance. You can feel it. You can feel a tingle. You can feel a change, a shift, usually in your palms. I know people who are psychometric. This is the ability to touch things and have knowledge acquired through touch. But psychometric folks, if you have that as a latent skill, can actually feel things like colors, different types of vibrations for colors, emotions, even different textures. So this is a very unique skill that can be developed, and I have a whole EDU on it somewhere on my YouTube. You'll have to scroll through and find it, but this is part of this particular visualization for looking for and clearing obstacles on a timeline attached to a very specific goal that we're working on. Then typically what you would have is maybe a bucket of water with some blessed salt. We call that a vortex of energy. Now, what we're doing on this visualization journey as we're finding these obstacles and we're releasing them in that counterclockwise manner, we're kind of scooping up that blocked energy. We're scooping it up and we're emptying it into this vortex of energy. And once that bucket, when we're done with our timeline, we're going to take that bucket, we're going to empty it at a tree, usually a sacred tree that we're working at. Again, very rough overview of one of the practical applications of energetic manipulation in terms of visualizing removal. Now, after you do the first removal, I do encourage people to do additional scans. Do as many passes and removals as needed to really clear that timeline for that goal that you're trying to manifest. There are other tools you can use, of course. Some people like to use eggs, rosemary, vodka. If it's an emotional blockage, roses are great. You can combine these things. I used to use feathers. I don't do that so much anymore just because I have different techniques, but feathers are great for removing energy, and crystals are too. It's whatever works for you, right? You can kind of play around here and see what works best for this particular exercise. And again, I'm just giving you a rough overview of one of the visualization exercises. I'm going to present a few things to you today, but I wanted you to have an idea of what it would look like and what you would be doing in that visualization mode. And again, the mind is powerful. It's the most powerful manifestation tool that we have, especially when we're talking about manifestation and we're talking about clearing our path, opening doors. The mind is probably the most powerful tool, more so than anything else you're going to use in your practice. So we are responsible for the energy that we take out and release. So remember that. You want to ensure that once you do something like this, your path stays open now, right? You got to keep that path open. I think that a good way to kind of break this down is when we're talking about divine energy or divine sourced energy, that's a healing frequency. And in a lot of visualization practices, a lot of yogini practices, that appears as blue. Okay, it doesn't have to you, but in a lot of cultures and shamanism, it's usually a blue light or a blue fire. It's very, it sounds complex, but it really isn't. All you have to do is really ask the divine source for this healing blue frequency, right? Grab it and then send it to your path to keep the path open, right? So that your mind and your emotions don't affect things. They don't create more blockage. So another very simple technique that you can incorporate here. So we want to attract in life. What's at the end of our path? That's our goal. And we're always looking towards goals. I don't know anybody who doesn't have at least 4 or 5 different goals they're working on at any given time. So if you breathe oxygen and you eat food and you poop, you are probably wanting to attract certain things at any given time in your life, right? You have paths, you have goals at the end of them. What we want wants us to. And you need to believe in that, right? So the next step in this process is what we like to call magnetizing. So let's jump into that because a lot of people don't understand that concept. What we are going after, it wants us as well, right? It's reciprocal. Oh, these PowerPoints. Okay. All right, hang on. Boy, I have a dry mouth today, you guys. I'm having dental work done. So like my mouth is all yeah. All right. So let's talk about part of magnetizing is anchoring. And I talk about anchoring a lot. When I do casts for third parties, I usually send a lot of photos, I send a lot of videos. And part of that is to help you anchor that energy. It's very easy for me to anchor it, but I'm doing it as a third party practitioner. You are the castee. I need you to anchor it as well. So for root works, for puppetry works, for my altar service works, a lot of times those photos and videos serve the purpose of anchoring. Now, in magnetizing, when we're talking about energetic clearage, anchoring really references how we need to start becoming that thing that we want to attract it. If we want prosperity, we need to become prosperous, right? Beings, entities, that energy, that frequency to attract that prosperity to us. You can't be down in the dumps, miserable, waking up every day pissed off at the world and then wanting to attract love. Love cannot magnetize to you. You can't anchor it because the frequencies are mismatched. The frequencies have to be the same if you want to pull that in. So, another little exercise I like is I call it the bowling ball, right? It's the visualization process of a bowling ball of energy from divine source, like what we were just talking about, asking and grabbing that blue frequency fire to break obstacles on our path. Quite literally, it's like you're going bowling and you are looking at your path, which is your timeline, and you are throwing that light down that and you are just knocking the hell out of those obstacle pins. It's another really neat way to use visualizations to help clear a path. A lot of people, especially, those who are of Spanish descent, they use that bowling ball of energy technique to do a lot of day to day obstacle removal stuff. Flight turbulence. I hate being on a turbulent flight. Clouds, if they want, there's a cleansing of the clouds bowling ball of energy visualization technique. If you're stuck in traffic, getting traffic to move. If you're trying to get some paperwork sped up, a loan approval. If you're trying to speed up a project or speed up results. If you are in a very long line, you want the line to speed up, you want to get ahead in the queue. This bowling ball technique is great for day to day, what I like to call little headache blockages when we're trying to get something done, but there's all these little delays that keep popping up, or there's, somewhere we need to go, something we need to do, and we need to just kind of speed it up. So it doesn't always have to be a big, sometimes I actually encourage people to start with this process because it's small, it's easy, right? It's a very quick visualization. And then you learn and you grow and you become more powerful with this, then you can move on to the next level. But it's a good place to start, right? To just train your brain and condition your brain to visualize and put faith in those visualizations, right? So, this same kind of idea here we can use for a lot of day to day things. I think that is very helpful as a starting platform for anybody who has not done a lot of guided imagery or visualization work in terms of manifestation or obstacle clearing. I think visualizations in general, it's so important to develop our ability to visualize because that's how we detect our mental programming. That's how we detect what needs to be removed and released because it's creating negative effect, right? We talk a lot about faking it until you make it or trusting in the process. That is a mental program. Faking it till you make it and trusting in a process is totally 110% mindset. And doing visualizations and imagery exercises like this really is a great way to get rid of old conditioning that creates blockage and kind of recondition us to be open to this process and to manifest again with our most important, most valuable tool that we have, which is our brain. Spirit's very important, but your brain can destroy anything and everything very, very quickly. So we gotta use our brain. All right, so this exercise, when we're talking about energetic clearage, is called the technique of the timeline. It is a cleansing timeline exercise. So I have a little timeline on screen here, and I like to try to keep things simple, but I kind of have it broken up into months For you, whatever goal you're working on, again, I use the example of, okay, my goal right now is I'm opening a brick and mortar in November. It's April. I'm going to have April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November on my timeline, right? And at the end of that is my manifestation of that brick and mortar. So I think a really nice, if you can use a whole body technique, it's a lot more energy. This is one of those where you are going to use your whole body as a scanner. So you're going to get barefoot, right? And you're going to walk the distance of your timeline on the floor. Now, some people use tape to represent the timeline. They'll even use tape to mark off the months on the floor. That's a good way to start. It gives you kind of a visual to tap into before you go into the visualization process in your head. You'll walk the distance of it. Again, you're barefoot. Same thing with your palms and hands when you're doing a body scan. You're using your feet. You're using your feet now to kind of scan. You're going to feel that energy in your feet as you walk the distance of it. And when you hit parts that are tingling or feeling off or something's just not right there, you're going to bend, you're going to visualize scooping up that stagnant obstacle based energy. You're going to put it in that bucket of water, your vortex, and you're going to release it later on, pour it at your sacred tree or whatever you use for release work. But this is a very good physical and mental sort of combination exercise that I think is very powerful. Again, start small and build yourself up to these bigger exercises. But this is one that I find very, very beneficial. And again, if you need more background on how to scan with your hands, with your feet, how that process works, if you go to my YouTube, I have videos on there. You're just going to have to scroll down because I think I did them last year. So they're somewhere in there. But very good technique. There are a lot of correlations to chronic healing techniques with this timeline technique. So keep that in mind. So anyway, other things that you can use in this process. We talked about correlations in terms of allies and helpers. Well, some of the helpers come in the form of tools that you may or may not already use in your practice. But witch hazel, I actually like a nice witch hazel and lavender combination, half and half spray. Spraying the room before you start your practice with the visualizations. If you're making a visual timeline on the floor with tape, spray that area. I like Florida water, rosemary, basil, citric plants. You can kind of make a compound with those. Of course, physical fire. I love sacred fire. You can incorporate fire into this. Again, these are physical items with energy and frequency that we can use to help with our mental visualization and manifestation of obstacle clearing. So we're kind of getting into more of this kind of combination where we are using physical with the mental. I think that there are a lot of botanicals out there. I like botanicas. I think they're like candy shops. They have lots of nice items. They're floor washes for obstacle removal candles. I think it's called Seven de Machos or San de Machos. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've been in a good botanica, but it comes in a black bottle. That's actually a compound that helps with obstacle removal. And I think it's Seven de Machos. I could be wrong. But yeah, a floor wash if you want to clean the floor before you do this physical timeline exercise, if you're going to be marking it out with tape. These are all helpers, allies in obstacle clearing. They're items and tools with the right frequency, with the right vibration that can help you kind of combine these aspects to get to the end goal, right? Which is removing the obstacle. Oh, and very important, when you're done doing these exercises, I think you want to physically cleanse your hands and feet. Using a nice cleansing soap, Florida water is good for this, but you always want to kind of get that energetic gunk off of your feet and your hands, especially if you're scanning a lot. All right, here's just a kind of a example timeline. I don't know why I picked Nelson Mandela, but I did. But say if you were working through maybe some shadow work, trauma bonding, you're looking to kind of clear some of that. That's a little bit more advanced than your more simpler obstacles, which is where you should start. but you would actually look at a life timeline. So I was using this as an example and trying to find on that timeline when the shadow rupture or the fragmentation occurred, when the trauma bonding occurred, so that you can start working on releasing that. And then replace cleansed energy with new energy, okay? Because when we scoop out stagnant, gunky, crappy energy, it does leave a hole. That's where fragmentation can occur. And fragmentation is like an infection, okay? If you have an open wound and you're not keeping it clean, you're not keeping it covered, bacteria is going to get in there. You're going to get an infection. Same thing with spirit, you guys. Same thing with energy. And once you kind of fill that with that blue sacred fire or that green sacred fire, you're going to seal it. Again, part of the visualization process. You're going to seal it. Prayer or petitions can be done for energy to seal it, for extraction, and even for filling holes. So if you're not good with like visualization of light, some people actually struggle with that. There's actually a scientific term for it, and I can't remember what it is. But if you have a hard time visualizing light or perceiving light from the mind's point of view, you can use petitions, you can use prayer, whatever is in your practice that is engineered and designed to help seal off energy, to extract nasty energy, to fill energetic holes. Use it. You can write your own. That's the beauty of this work. Maybe you want to write your own energetic sealing psalm. It's your own psalm, right? Maybe you want to write your own prayer for extraction. I have a video on here on my YouTube somewhere. It is sacred poetry, and it talks about writing sacred poems. And I actually have used sacred poetry for energetic sealing, extraction, and for fragmentation, whole preventative care. We'll call it preventative care. But sometimes people are very good at writing, 4 lines of poetry. It's sacred poetry specifically for this type of work. So whatever works for you, again, that's the beauty of it. You guys can play around, figure out what works for you, and then use it. And the more you use it, the more consistently you're using it, the more powerful this practice becomes. You're also teaching the universe, right? You're telling the universe, this is what I'm going to do and this is what I expect. And then they're just going to know. And you're not going to have to, sometimes you can start, kind of cutting corners too, but don't do that right away. Let's talk about cleansing a spirit or an entity from a physical location, because that is part of my practice. Since I've relocated here to the Twin Cities, I haven't been doing a whole lot of that, but I used to do a lot between the Milwaukee-Chicago corridor for years. I did energetic cleansing of spaces and places, which can be very intense. But you can also use these techniques for cleansing a spirit from a physical place and even an object. Sometimes objects have attachments. All right, I gotta take another drink. Gosh, man, I wish this dental work would hurry up and heal. I'm sure there's a visualization for that, but I've been really busy lately. Anyway, okay. So let's say you're at a property and there is an attachment, a transient spirit that has been attached to this property. 90% of the time, all you need to do is make contact and ask what they are, why they're there, and what do they need to be able to leave. Honest to God, you guys, 90% of the time, that alone does a trick. They're going to communicate somehow. Maybe it's something simple. They're going to go. Now, for the 10%, the exceptions, right, that aren't going to communicate, that are disturbed or disrupted spirits, basically, in a nutshell, you're going to be cleansing the frequency of that place, space, or object so that that spirit cannot stay. They can't feed there. They're going to have to vacate, right? It's like an eviction, basically. But what you're doing is you have to cleanse the frequency, because in order for it to exist there, there has to be lower frequencies there for it to feed on and for allow it to stay attached. If you transmute lower frequency into a higher frequency, it will naturally go through the eviction process. Okay. How do you do that? Very simple. What are high frequency activities? Well, Nowadays, there's actually devices. There's a lot of paranormal research and investigation groups that make equipment specifically to change the frequency in an environment. There's vibrometers. You can read the frequency of an environment. There's a lot of gadgets out there, but there are natural things you can do also, right? You don't need to go buy a $600 gadget to, um, you know, change the frequency. What you can, or a frequency generator is what they're called. And I've used those, but dancing is high frequency. It's going to disrupt lower frequencies and transmute them. Storms. If there is a snowstorm, a rainstorm, a thunderstorm, those are high frequency events. You open all the windows, you open all the doors, and you let that storm air in to transmute the lower frequencies into a higher frequency. Reparations. And the reason I'm bringing up that term is sometimes places, spaces, and objects have energetic holes that are fragmented, right? If you can help repair and restore that through just listening to a story or absorbing a story that that entity needs to be telling, that could be enough to kind of repair the hole and then seal it, and then they're gone, right? So there could be some reparations. A place, especially, there have been a couple of homes over the years that I've been to that awful things have occurred on the land that the home was built on, or awful things happened to the wood or the metal that was used. There was attachments, just awful things that happened. And sometimes it's just hearing that story so that it can be released and then the problems are gone. So reparations. If there is a more narcissistic entity or energy attached, oh my gosh, you guys, dental work. I should be healed up in about another day or two. Um, if it's a narcissistic transient spirit, you don't want to be reactive, because if you react, just like living narcissists, if you react, you're feeding them energy. So even in the realm of the dead, the realm of spirit, you don't want to react. You want to stay very grounded. You want to try to pull that energy. Um, you're going to have to be a little bit more forceful, but if you react, they're going to get an energetic push. It gives them more power. So if you can stay grounded and non-reactive, they can't get any energy then. It kind of makes them weak and vulnerable, very easy to pull. So just kind of an FYI. And you guys can always private message me if you're encountering a weird situation. But other things I like to use were spaces and places and objects, feathers again. Black hen feathers specifically have always been my go-to. Those are good cleansing agents. Your breath. You can actually blow out obstacles. This is shamans do this. Again, it does require visualization, focus, and concentration, but using your breath, you can literally blow out attachments. Same thing with obstacles on your timeline. If you would rather use the breath method of blowing out versus the scooping method into the bucket of water or the vortex. Um, then there's the molecular dissolution and magnetic calling technique. So, I had to throw a couple of heady things in here, right? And all that basically is, to break it down into a very simple nutshell here, is identifying what that attachment wants, asking it again what it needs, and then vibrating that frequency. So instead of kind of a release and replacement, the difference here with molecular dissolution and that magnetic calling technique is we actually are going to create almost like a vibrational altar in that environment and attach it to that place or that object or that space. And we are going to vibrate the frequency of what is needed in order to clear out the attachments. So if somebody needed love and they died heartbroken, 555, we're going to go 555 hertz. We are going to attach that energy, because once we have, and that can take a minute, that's not a very quick way to resolve an issue with a space, place, or object, but it is, if you're having issues, it's a kind of a last call in to resolve the issue. And it may take some time, a couple of days, maybe even a week, but it'll clear it if you're having issues with clearing that area. But then you're going to vibrate that frequency until it completely attaches and it heals, repairs, and restores whatever was causing the problem. So I do want to put this in here. Sometimes the universe will scold us if we interfere with timelines. And that is because some obstacles, I think most obstacles can be removed in doing some of the, things we talked about today, but not all. I think some obstacles are part of a predestination that we aren't supposed to screw with our own or with other people's. And you're going to know. You are going to know. You're going to feel it. You are going to have an awareness of it somehow. If you keep trying to remove something that is a predestination factor, the universe probably is going to get a little bit pissed. And you are going to be told not to interfere with that timeline in some way, shape, or form. And you need to respect that. And part of it is, especially if you're like me, I'm a third party practitioner and you're my client, I know that the consequences for you are going to get bad if you don't learn your lessons. And if I keep taking this obstacle off your path and you're not learning that lesson because I keep moving it, crazy shit's going to start happening and it's going to start ramping up and getting worse and worse. The consequences are going to come in because now you're not learning a lesson that you have to learn. So, as a good practitioner, as a good person, I'm going to probably say to you, listen, I'm being scolded here because for whatever purpose, whatever reason, you need to learn something here and we need to leave it alone, as shitty as that is. And not everybody's going to be receptive to that. You're going to have people that are like, well, fuck you. I'm going to find a different witch. Okay. Okay. I get that. But I have an ethical obligation to myself, to you, to the universe that, I can't keep taking this off because we're getting in trouble now. We're getting yelled at. I think it's important to remember that tiny things make big impacts. When we talk about doing these visualizations, they seem small, they seem inconsequential, but they have a huge impact. It's like miniatures. Everybody knows I'm a conjure miniature enthusiast. I love doll houses. I have 112 scale to 1/6 scale. I have had 1/3 and 1/4 scale before. Those are big, but tiny, tiny 112 scale miniatures. I make little real workable prosperity mojos in 112 scale, and they are probably more powerful than my full size gree that I make. So again, tiny things can make big impacts and hold big energy. So don't be confused or believe in the hype that something isn't enough. Because in a lot of cases, these types of exercises are more than enough, right? Use your voice. We've talked about this again. If you go to my YouTube, I have lots of videos. I have one on there about Tibetan sex magic, right? And I talk about malas and mantras, and I talk about in Buddhism the tiras and the sacred syllables, the sacred words, the sacred sounds. Again, use your voice. Your voice is sacred as part of this process to feed energy or intent towards what you're doing. A lot of people that do this type of clearage, again, it has a very Mexican flavor to it. They like to use pendulums. If you're a pendulum person, try to incorporate that into your detection. If you're having a hard time with scanning with your hands or scanning with your feet, pendulums may be a good way to kind of pick up on energetic displacement, right? Or areas of stagnant or negative energy buildup. Just use that as the scan device. And always remember, there's a butterfly effect, right? And I talk about this with clients a lot in one-on-one settings, but the butterfly effect can be good or bad. The results can be mixed. Anytime we change things, we change one thing, right? Other things are going to change, right? You can't think in terms of, okay, I'm just going to change and alter this one little thing and not realize that by changing and altering that one little thing, we are probably changing and altering 1,000 other little things that affect probably 10 or 20 different people, right? So always keep that in mind. You always want to be mindful of the butterfly effect when we are transmuting energy, when we are manipulating energy, and when we are changing the frequency and vibration, whether it's of a person, an object, a place, a space. Always be mindful. I always ask, am I going to really hurt anybody or am I going to really screw something up for somebody if I do this? And I will have a meditation session on that. So just be mindful. It's part of ethics. Doctors have these ethics, lawyers have ethics. We, as spiritual, magical practitioners, we have ethics too. And it's important that we are mindful. Otherwise, consequences for us can be very, very bad as well. So keep that in mind. So I think that was it. It is. I want to thank you guys for your continued support, of course, on Patreon. I am trying to actively grow Patreon. I am on Substack now. I am trying to grow that. I would like to start doing more live podcasts on both Patreon and Substack. I got to have enough viewership. I think I need more viewers on Substack. Same thing with YouTube. But I'm working towards it, you guys. I'm getting more techie each and every day. That's one of my goals in 2026 because Uranus and Gemini should be helping me become more techie. But here's our Patreon QR code and our website QR code. So feel free to check us out if you're not already a member. You can join at any time. We do have free levels all the way up through $75 a month pledges, which includes a whole ton of stuff, including a live one-on-one with me every month. So check us out. And as always, wait, let me close this. Yeah, we need the full screen for me to be like my catchphrase, stay magical. And if you have any follow-up questions or if anything didn't make sense, feel free to reach out. I have no problem kind of like breaking things down. I try to limit these in time because they get really, really long. But just be patient with me in terms of responses. I do get busy sometimes. I get backed up in responding to emails, but I never ignore anyone. So you just got to be patient. And other than that, have a good one, you guys.